Hello, dear friends, it's Carly, and welcome back to another episode of Unique Astrology. We are in the process of working through Betty White's natal chart. This is the third episode of that. So if you've missed the first two, by all means, check those out. I put the links in the description. And today we are going to dive into several things that no matter what your age, it's possible that people at every age can have these placements. They are extremely common. I would love to hear from anybody in the comments who shares these placements that we're going to talk about today. They are Mercury in Aquarius, Mercury in the 6th house, Aquarius Descendant, and Leo rising. Those are the pieces that we are covering in today's episode. So again, if you have any of them, I would love to hear from you as far as what we're going to talk about in the video, how that resonates with you. Love to hear from you in the comments, really no matter what. So yeah, if you feel like talking to me down there, by all means, have at it. So I'm hoping that this episode will be roughly 40 minutes. If it's a longer one, you know what, like that just might be the way it is. So I am extremely passionate about what we are getting into here today, being Mercury in Aquarius in Betty's 6th house and Aquarius Descendant and Leo rising. All of those archetypes that we're going to get to touch on are things that are just like really important for all of us to be able to understand about ourselves. And I know I say this in basically every episode of Unique Astrology. I know this is only the third one, but every time, really the whole point, I'm going to be totally transparent with you. My whole goal is to make you like curious and hungry for more knowledge about yourself. So like if you've never pulled your natal chart before, I left that link in the description as well, along with a couple videos of mine of like where to get started, how to even do that. So without further ado, let's dive into Betty's Unique Astrology. And I think all of these pieces are very much going to come together to show you what I mean about how much each and every single one of us can potentially learn by studying somebody else's unique astrology. So the first piece that I want to talk about is Mercury, and that is kind of left over from episode 2, where episode 2 focused on Betty's 6th house stellium with her sun, Venus, and Mercury all in her 6th house. Her sun and Venus are in Capricorn, and then Mercury's in Aquarius. But all three are in her 6th house. So we covered the 6th house in depth along with the sun and Venus in Capricorn. So we already touched on all of that, so I'm gonna really glaze over the 6th house part of her Mercury, only gonna use it really to tie it all back together with how that affects the Aquarius side of the Mercury. We're not gonna get back into the 6th house. So for that conversation, do check back to episode 2. The pieces that are new here that I wanna add to build on episode 2, what we covered. So Mercury as a planet in our solar system, Mercury is a planet in our natal chart. What does it mean? You know, like what does it stand for? Every single planet in our chart is a side of our personality. And you think about it, like we all have the same planets in our chart, right? Like we all have the same sides of our personalities. We just all are wired differently depending on where that planet was in the sky at the time of your entry. And Mercury specifically is the fastest planet in the solar system. It only takes 88 days to go around the sun. So that's like really freaking fast. That's why it goes retrograde so many times a year, because basically it has to. That's us catching back up with where Mercury has gotten to. We have to catch up and then it's allowed to go forward again and then we have to. So like that's really what's going on because it's such a fast planet. And that makes a lot of sense because Mercury rules basically the inner workings of our mind. a lot of times I hear that Mercury rules communication, and that sounds like talking, and it is, that's part of it. But you know, I love listening to Stephen Forrest. I give him credit every single time I make one of these episodes because his archetypes are so helpful to look at like these planets from that evolutionary perspective. Mercury is about communication, but the first step of communication, of effective communication, powerful, authentic, impactful communication, that's really what we're talking about. We're not just talking about talking just to talk, but really having something to say that sticks with people, that hits them right where those were the exact words that they needed to hear in that moment, and those few words stay with them for the rest of their lives. Like delivering that kind of communication, you know, like being heard and respected and taken seriously and uninterrupted because people want to hear what you have to say. Like, tell me we don't all want that. Like, aren't we all trying to get our point across at least sometimes, like basically every day? Like that's kind of just part of human experience and dealing with other people, being in a world that includes other people. There's communication that has to happen. And the first step of communication is listening, taking it in, taking in the environment, taking in what is, as openly and unbiasedly as possible. And basically how Stephen Forrest presents it as far as like what actually is Mercury, like what is it doing? It's a filter. It's a filter that exists between us and the rest of the world. So your Mercury placement by sign and by house are both telling you what kind of a filter are you operating with. And that's a really good place to kind of stop and say, Stephen Forrest puts it like, this is bedrock. This kind of understanding that like we have the exact chart that we are supposed to have. Every single placement is exactly what it needed to be for you to have the exact energy to do the mission that you were coming forward to do. Like we have to have that as our base foundation of understanding in order to get to a place where we can see the evolutionary purpose intended behind every single placement that ever could exist. Like all the planets in all the different parts of the sky, all the different aspects. You know, there's astrologers out there who will say things like, this is a bad aspect to have in your chart. And I don't operate like that because I'm, you know, Stephen Forrest evolutionary school of thought, where every single placement in your chart is exactly what it needs to be. Every single placement is exactly what you intended for it to be. And it's serving you incredibly well. And so like, what is Mercury doing? What is that filter accomplishing? And really it is like, it's such a valuable gift in terms of Mercury is essentially how we pay attention. So like how you pay attention. You think about like probably most of us live in a world where we think everybody else pays attention just like I do. And then we get frustrated with other people when they don't notice details like you do, or they say disrespectful things and you would never say that. Like you just can't even understand, like how could they possibly, like how do they not see this? How do they not get it? How do they not just understand this? Like I say this sometimes. I'm thinking of my mom, not to throw her under the bus, but like she just like doesn't get how people don't think like she does. And it's so hilarious to watch. And the answer is Mercury. The answer is we all have our own Mercury sign, Mercury house, Mercury aspects. What is it close to? It can only be like in the sign with your sun, or the sign before, or the sign after. So there's only 3 signs options that your Mercury can be in given your sun sign, because Mercury stays so close to the sun. So like what's going on with your Mercury? And that tells us a lot about how you pay attention, how you see the world. he gave an example where he quoted like a story of himself compared to this other person. So he's like, we're sitting at this like cafe and just kind of people watching, and I see this person who I think is giving off Uranian vibes. Like maybe he's an Aquarius rising, or maybe that's his sun sign, or he has a stellium, and like this is what's going through Stephen Forrest's mind as he's looking at this person in the cafe while he's people watching. And he's like, and then imagine at the table next to me there's another gentleman who is also looking at this same exact person, and what they're doing in their mind, they're an insurance salesman. So they're thinking approximate age 50 years old, race Asian, likely lifespan approximately 40 more years, good prospect for selling life insurance. So this person's a life insurance salesman. Maybe like his moon is in Virgo, maybe his like sun is in the 8th house. Like Stephen Forrest gives all these examples for like why when two different people are looking at the same exact person, why is one of them summing up what they think their natal chart is, and the other one is like trying to calculate how much their life insurance premium would be? Like they're looking at the same person. So why are they doing something different in their minds? Mercury is the answer to all of these things. Like it's how we pay attention. It's what we're curious about. Like when you look at the world, you notice different things. He also quotes, I think he said it was like a Hindu proverb. I forget that part exactly. I'm sure we could Google it. But basically it said, when the pickpocket meets the saint, he sees pockets. So it's like that. It's like that's our perception of the world. That's our filter for the world that we live in. And think about how powerful that is. Think about how powerful it is to understand that like literally all of us are wired so differently. Like our attention span, the length of it, what will capture it, what will keep us engaged. Like we are all wired so very differently. And those things we kind of sometimes forget because it's so normal inside our head with how our mind works that you just like my mom, like lose track of how do people not get this? How do they not see this simple, practical, logical solution? Why can't everyone see that? And I'm like, Mom, you are like the most logical, practical person I know. Okay, that's your superpower. She still doesn't get it. So like, it's like that. It's like realizing, where is your genius? Because Mercury is really like, it's at a very high frequency. It moves so fast, like that vibration moves very quickly. And think about like the representation then with our thoughts. Like talking, you can communicate, you can, express a lot of different things through talking, but it's so slow compared to how much you can really do inside your mind. Like the speed of thought, that's Mercury, like how freaking fast it is, like just running around the sun like a little chihuahua. Yeah, let's see, what else? So some other ways to think about Mercury, it's our questions and our learning. So the subjects that we are interested enough to want to learn about. And, even if that's football, even if that's race car driving, even if that's mechanics, even if that, like, what? Human behavior, psychology, astrology, what is it that just captures your attention? And look then to your Mercury and see if you can see how those things link up. You can also, as far as like going back full circle with what we said at the beginning, as far as we're not just talking about communication, we're talking about effective communication, like words that leave an impact on people. Like Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. That is a perfect example of like those words are infamous. So we're not just talking about like throwing spaghetti noodles at the wall and seeing what sticks. We're talking about like, how do you tune into your own authentic mercurial essence, where basically Mercury as a planet also is known as the messenger of the gods. And that is because like in that mercurial essence where you know how you pay attention, you are perfectly open in your own unique way. When you are open, the gods like drop in messages. that looks like all of a sudden having an idea in your brain, or getting a vision or a picture or a feeling or something that's like brand new, just like drops in. And that happens through that willingness to be open and take it in, which again, that's where like effective communication starts with learning. The very first step to Mercury is listening and paying attention and getting all the information, getting your facts, like gather it all up. And then the second part is the sharing and the passing it forward and teaching other people what you've learned and all of that, like communication, that side of it, that talking side of it, where now you're passing it along to the next person. So essentially Mercury is data in, data out. And that also is very simplified as far as like our Mercury placement tells us what kind of data is going in, and our Mercury placement also shows us what is the most powerful, effective form of your own communication style. If you want to be heard, tune into that mercurial essence in your own being and come from that place. So yeah, bottom line on Mercury is if you want to be heard and you want to be understood, learn to communicate in your authentic Mercury style. For Betty White, that is Aquarius in the 6th house. And those two things could not be further opposites from each other. So we're going to cover Aquarius in some depth here. Since we really didn't get to that in episode 2. And then, like I said, we're going to gloss through the 6th house, but just enough so we can tie it all back together. So Aquarius energy, just all by itself, is like the loner archetype. It's the willingness to basically have enough courage to not care what other people think of you, and to be willing to kind of stand alone and take in the view from this separated vantage point and come up with your own ideas, that Aquarius is air energy. So when you open yourself up, you receive ideas and downloads and all kinds of things. And so as you take in this view, you receive those ideas of what you think like the best possible future for humanity looks like. And that sounds really grand because it is. So basically Aquarius, like in general, rules like our hopes, wishes, dreams. And Aquarius has a very humanitarian spirit. It's often associated with freedom and individuality, which is exactly true. And as the Aquarius energy is embodying that personal freedom, they're not just giving that to themselves, they're basically making a statement that all people should have access to this level of personal freedom. So there is a beautiful humanitarian spirit inside Aquarius energy. That's what I really want to wrap around all of this. But at the same time, like Aquarius has the side known as like the rebel, the troublemaker, the rule breaker, the flipping the bird to the establishment kind of guys. And that is the shadow side of Aquarius, is basically rebelling just to rebel. Like even if it's to your own detriment, you can like push away from things that you are sensing are trying to encroach on your personal freedom. And we're going to get into that because Betty, yeah, she's got an Aquarius Descendant along with her Aquarius Mercury. So to tie Aquarius and Mercury together, basically you get something of like an irreverent freedom fighter. And that sounds extreme compared to Betty White, but at the same time, going back to that Netflix documentary that I watched of her, which I tried to go back and find this morning and I did not see it on there. So I don't know if it's still there, but back in the day, this was back when the South was still, I don't mean to make that face, but really, the South was still all up in their segregation nonsense, and basically some groups of states and TV networks down in that area, they expressed to Betty White and her show at the time that if she's going to have on this Black American individual, that they're not going to carry her show, and that she needs to get rid of that guest, and that's just not appropriate, yada, yada, yada. And she had the guest on repeatedly, and others, and like just flat out was like, then don't carry the show. like, then don't do that because you're clearly wrong. Like, and so the fact that she was really able to kind of stand up for the human rights side of things, Aquarius and Mercury are both more masculine archetypes. And so I think that's like one example where like she stood her ground. She was not caving in to their nonsensical demands. She knew her truth. She knew that this is the right thing to do, that there's no difference between this person and this person. Like the color of the skin is not a thing that changes the human inside. Like, so she knew that, and she was operating like that in a time when that was not cool. But she was willing to do that. She was willing to kind of walk that unwalked path, even when other people told her like, hey, quit it, don't do that. She's like, no, I think I'm gonna do it. I think I'm gonna walk this path. I'm pretty sure. Yep, here I go. And here she goes. Like, I love that about her. It's probably one of my favorite pieces of her whole story. I love her whole story. Any kind of documentary you watch about her is just absolutely wonderful. But that piece where in a time where that was really controversial, and she just like, I mean, the way she tells the story, it was just like a no-brainer to her, essentially. And so again, we go back to Mercury is how we pay attention. Mercury is how we see the world. And Aquarius being so humanitarian, so freedom-oriented, so individuality-oriented, which basically translates to like they love diversity. Aquarius energy is where we look at other people in their full-blown eccentric individuality, all their little idiosyncrasies and like all their little things. And it's just like the coolest thing you've ever seen. Like, you want to see the ones who are different, not the ones that are the cookie cutter that like all look the same. You want to see the different ones. And so that Aquarius energy, that Mercury in Aquarius, it's like she naturally attracted other minds who would challenge her. I mean, Mercury in Aquarius gifts include thinking outside the box. From that vantage point of like not being connected to society, they're literally not in the box. That's why they're thinking outside the box. And like I said, that boils back down into basically a courage to not let it matter what other people think of you. And that is that freedom of Mercury in Aquarius. So the shadow side of Mercury in Aquarius is basically rebel without a cause. And I feel like we didn't, I mean, unless it's went uncovered or unreported, like I don't really feel like we ever saw that from her. Like, she wasn't needlessly rebellious. It was very heart-centered. And I feel like that is where the sixth house piece is coming into play, where Aquarius Mercury is basically confrontational. It's like kind of a little bit in your face, like with here's my intuitive sense, which is one of their superpowers. Here's my intuitive sense of your own limiting beliefs and assumptions, your biases against other individuals who are different from you. And here I am going to help you see this, going to help you realize it. That's like Mercury in Aquarius's evolutionary mission, is to help other people see their own limiting assumptions. And again, confrontational. We don't get that from her, you know, that's not how she was with it. And I think a lot of that is because it was in her sixth house. So when we talked about sixth house last time, here are just some keywords to kind of get us back into that vibe. Service, technical skills to be of value, the mentorship relationship, and just learning from other people's wisdom in general, our daily routines, learning from others who speak from their souls. There's like Mercury in the sixth house, there's this ability to hear when other people are legit, like when what they're saying is based in their own actual experience and wisdom versus they're just blowing hot air. So Mercury in the sixth house, if you have it, it's like this intuitive ability to basically be around knowledgeable, experienced individuals, and you just are able to almost download out of their aura into you their experience and knowledge and wisdom. And that also reminds me back to her story and how she described like being on TV, like at first and in those early years where she just learned everything. She just like was learning from the camera guys how the camera works, and she's learning from the lighting people how the lights work, and she's learning over here on how the schedule works and like all of the different pieces. Like, not to mention, she's just hilarious. She just has like a point of view that's funny. And how does she do that? This Mercury in Aquarius, where she is not inside the box. She's over here outside the box. And her soul's mission, that Mercury mission, is to show people their underlying assumptions. And what else is comedy? Like, especially improv. It just like reminds me especially of her improv abilities, where that they said like that's some of her best comedy, because you're so much in the moment, in the energy of it, and like that intuitive ability to soak up other people's limiting beliefs and whatever. So basically it's like this like ninja ability where everybody else is in the dark and she's got the night vision goggles on, because she can see exactly where to hit people in terms of they're not expecting that, because she can see this is the box that they're operating with. So I'm going to put my comment, I'm going to say this thing out here, because they're not going to expect it. And that's what comedy is. It's a surprise. And so she was really good at surprising people because she had that intuitive sense of, you know, also, when you put the sixth house together with the Aquarius part is like wanting to show people their own limiting beliefs. And the sixth house part is like wanting to be of service. One thing I really liked about Mercury in the sixth house, this was from the book of Air, as Stephen Forrest described Mercury in the sixth house, was basically like, when you are in the presence, like in the physical presence of someone with a genuine need, like they need help with this thing, whatever it is, that like essentially your own thoughts and abilities and perspective and everything, it like blossoms in the experience of their need. You blossom with the ability to handle whatever their need is, which again, like holy freaking crap, like Mercury in the sixth house, I could see how that could very easily translate to some type of healthcare. Healthcare is also associated with the sixth house, like health in general. But I could see where, like, if you have Mercury in the sixth house, like that ability to basically soak up people's needs, like just out of their energy, and then you have this natural answer that just blossoms inside your mind, and then here it is. So when you tie all of that back together, it's like really like the service that she provided was to help illuminate the box. Right? And like she didn't do it in a controversial, mean-spirited way. She did it in a loving, sixth house, supportive, wanting to take care of the needs of other people. She knew that like their needs will be better met if they have more open minds. And opening people's minds was like one of the things that she did best, I think. And again, I think comedy fits perfectly there, with kind of like laughter disarms us. It kind of breaks down our defenses and gets us to be more open and receptive to whatever it is that's in front of us. So yeah, the fact that she could make us laugh made us more receptive to that Aquarius rebellion, wanting to illuminate the box so that more people weren't operating like feeling confined to this box. So it's just, again, a very beautiful and elegant way of going about her energy. And it goes to show that like there is no such thing as a bad placement, where, you know, you read on so many things out there on the internet where it's like Aquarius Mercury is basically destined to be a rebel and a nonconformist, and basically fighting with anybody who is the rules or is the establishment. And it's just a very confrontational energy. And Betty White's wasn't like that, because it's in the sixth house, because it's along with her sun and Venus in Capricorn, which really, again, I think tamed down that fighter side of the Aquarius energy. So yeah, it does pay off to like look at the whole chart, look at the house that it's in, look at what other energy is in that house, and see that a lot of times, like, you know, the house is the action. We are our signs and we do our houses. So the fact that this Aquarius Mercury was in the sixth house, she didn't just, like if she had had that in the 11th house, for example, like the house associated with Aquarius, that would look very different. It would look like more the confrontational presentation, like what is typical with Aquarius Mercury. But because she has it situated in the sixth house, it's like, really, it's fueling this action of service. It's just informing how she is of service to the collective, like what the sixth house is all about. Part of her service is that Aquarius Mercury, where she's helping to illuminate the box that people think they're in, because she knew, like, you know, a lot of us do, that the box isn't real. Like, we get to be our individual self, and she knew that, and she helped other people know it too. So because we're right here in Aquarius, and it's Aquarius season right now, meaning the sun is moving through Aquarius, I thought it would be also fun to cover her Aquarius Descendant and her Leo rising. So that axis across the horizon of the chart is the literal horizon at the moment of your birth. This axis is what your birth time gives us, because it's telling us at the moment you were born what sign, or really what point in that sign, was on the eastern horizon. That's your rising sign. And then what sign was setting, was descending. So what sign was on the western horizon, and that is your descendant. And they are always exactly opposite each other, like every single axis in the natal chart. So this is really one piece of energy. Like, when you have an axis, it kind of all goes together. It works together. They do different things, the two ends of the axis, but really they're happening more simultaneously. And so that's why we're gonna talk about it a little bit, like, together, because they mean a lot the same things. Like, the fact that she has a Leo rising, it means what it means a lot because she has an Aquarius descendant. Like, the fact that you're using those two energies together, what does that give you? And essentially, and so this would apply for any Leo risings. You always have the Aquarius descendant, and I would love to hear how this resonates. But basically, Leo risings are leaders. At the end of the day, like, their gift is in being able to make quick, important decisions. They have a confidence about themselves that lets them make those decisions. And so much of that is fueled from that Aquarius perspective of, like, wanting to be their own individual self. Because Aquarius is on the descendant side, that was the sign that was setting at the time that Betty was born. So what that means to have the sign on the descendant, so we all have one, that means that it's really subconscious. It's unconscious in us at first. It takes us a while to get into a place where we have realized this side of ourselves. It's like, by nature, it's like the middle center of your back. Like, you know, how many times in your life have you ever laid eyes on that spot? Not very many. Other people have seen it plenty. Other people see it all the time, but you have never seen it. It's like that. It's like, where is it? Like, I can't reach it. Like, it's like that. So yeah, other people help us see that descendant side of ourselves. So we attract people that have that energy to us. And a lot of times, like, we'll see in them what we can't quite find in ourselves, and then it turns into a fight or an argument with that other person, but ultimately we're just fighting with that side of ourselves that we can't really see. Like the dog who chases its own tail kind of thing is what it feels like a little bit, where, yeah, it's really going on inside of you, and the other person is only involved to the extent that you can't see this energy by yourself. You have to have somebody else to reflect it to you, especially early on before you've integrated it. Eventually, the goal is to integrate it and be able to feel it for yourself, even though, yes, it does exist in a more unconscious place. There's a way to use that and, like, really let it fuel the rest of your chart. So real quick, I'll take a step back too to talk about the rising sign in general and, like, what that really means, as far as, like, all the different pieces of the chart are representing a different side of our energy. So probably the easiest to understand analogy is to treat the whole chart like a house, and the rising sign is like the curb appeal of the house. So, like, if you were just gonna, like, do a drive-by on this house, what do you think? What does it look like on the outside? And now, obviously, think about it, like, you could have a really rundown looking house on the outside, and then on the inside, it's like so nice and warm and cozy and inviting and like the best place you've ever been. You can also have the reverse, where on the outside, it looks like a mansion and pristine and yada, yada, yada. And then you find out on the inside, it doesn't even have hot water. Like, gross, you know? Like, it's like that. It's like, what does it look like on the outside to someone who doesn't know a single thing about what's going on the inside? And so this is really helpful because for me, like personally, I feel like people were reacting to me and thinking something about me that like felt so far from like what I thought about myself and like how I experienced myself. And like I would get feedback about how I was presenting myself, that it was harsh or like insensitive or rude or whatever. And like on the inside, like I'm trying so hard to be nice. Like, what the hell is going on? This axis is going on. And it's like other people can see us like a whole different side of us, like the back middle of our back. Like, you know, they can lay eyes on this part of us, and we have to really work with it for a minute to integrate it and to be able to use it effectively then. So with our rising sign, with a Leo rising, then basically your curb appeal, that drive-by experience, is Leo energy. And Leo energy is ruled by the sun. Leo is the king of the jungle. The sun is the brightest star in our solar system. So these people are what you would call vibrant, extremely vibrant, extremely shining. Just their energy, their presence just takes up a huge space in the room. You can't help but all eyes on them. They just naturally attract people's attention. They really, 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 really want to make other people happy. They really, really want that. And depending on what house system you use, when you have a Leo rising, you either have an Aries midheaven or a Taurus midheaven. So this next part I'm going to say is especially for Taurus midheavens. Like, you just really, really, really want to make people happy, like almost to your own detriment. It can be where if you have a Taurus midheaven and a Leo rising, that means that your IC, or the beginning of your fourth house, is in Scorpio. And when your fourth house is in Scorpio, like Betty's was, basically you have really, really deep, sensitive emotions, really deep, sensitive emotions, where life experiences can often be traumatic for you because of how sensitive you are. It doesn't take much to traumatize these people, basically. And so that's why, like, maybe sometimes they have childhoods that don't look like abusive or turbulent, and at the same time, like, maybe it did feel that way. Like, I'm thinking of a very specific Leo rising Taurus midheaven who's not Betty White, and this reminds me of her story where, yeah, essentially, like, there was no abuse, quote unquote, but it basically felt that way from her perspective. And it, again, that goes back to how deeply sensitive these people are. And you think about it, like, the ones who hurt the worst on the inside are the ones who try the hardest to make other people happy, because they know the depth of how much it hurts to be in that emotional pain. And so I gotta think, again, that Leo rising of like shining in the world, wanting to make other people happy, basically just like pouring love out of themselves into every single person they meet. Every single person. They don't care who they are. They're gonna love them. And again, that also kind of is fueled by that Aquarius Descendant, where like really they love to find individual, eccentric, quirky people and then just like shine that unconditional love on their individuality. Like, that's really the ultimate, is to encourage the individuality of others with that bright light. And so like that just sounds so sweet. I did want to also touch on one other side of Leo risings that I've seen very commonly reported out in the astrology community, and that is that Leo risings can attract a lot of like drama and hate and like just hateful comments. And I would say like Leo energy, if you have a lot of Leo energy in general, like you basically attract love/hate without ever really trying to get either one, but you get both. in your lifetime. Like, you've experienced both of them. I will say though, I personally, I look at it just a tad bit deeper than a lot of the different places that I've seen talk about this, because I think still, regardless of what your rising sign is, regardless of what your natal chart looks like, life is always a mirror to us. So when we hold self-hatred, when we don't like ourselves, when we have any amount of wobble inside of ourselves where we don't approve of ourselves, we are judging and criticizing ourselves on the inside. And that can look like a lot of different things, as far as like what exactly you think you did wrong. And whether or not it's true is like a whole other story, but you could be telling yourself that. And if that's the vibration that you're in, then the world kind of has to reflect that to you, because that's really all life is one giant mirror. So when you have a Leo rising, I would just say, like, it's a very powerful magnet is what it ends up being. Is like, you attract other people to you whether you want it or not. And think about how many people in the world are fans of Betty White. Like, she had a ton of fans, and she also, I mean, she's such a beautiful example, like all the way back to episode 1 where we talked about, like, she very clearly learned how to use and channel the immense amount of tense energy that was inside of her, the powerful energy that was inside of her. And I think deep down, she was an extremely secure individual, which actually does point back to a really good upbringing and childhood. The fact that I feel like she came to that pretty early on. As far as like being secure, like if you look back at her marriage history, which is relevant since we're talking about the Descendant, which is the beginning of the 7th house, which rules committed partnerships, including marriage and business partnerships. So she had 3 marriages in her lifetime, and the first 2 were what I would consider traditional marriages, meaning she was of traditional marrying age. And like the timing of it was right. It was like, you know, the kind of marriage that comes out of like a game of musical chairs when the music stops playing and you have to sit down somewhere. And so like, okay, you're the person that's here at the time when I'm ready to get married. And so that's my own interpretation. I don't mean to like shed negative light on those first couple marriages. They didn't last very long. And again, that goes back to that Aquarius Descendant, where before you've integrated that energy, there's this like unconscious pushing anything away that feels even a little bit like it's taking your freedom. So I would imagine for her getting married early on, before she had like integrated that individual side of herself, it was very uncomfortable to be in a marriage, like period, to feel like you're in this committed partnership, you're kind of stuck there almost. I can definitely empathize with how uncomfortable it probably was, which again, those marriages did not last long. And then she was single for like 20 years. She didn't get remarried to Alan until I think she was like over 40, maybe even 50. And that, you know, like she even talked about in that Netflix documentary about how when she was getting together with Alan, it was a very slow process where for like, he almost instantly proposed to her, I'm pretty sure. And she said no for like 2 years and kept doing her thing. And they lived like on opposite sides of the country. And she just like, no, wasn't having it. Was just like independent and like not gonna, no, I'm not doing that. And so at that point, you're running into the shadow of that Aquarius Descendant, where we're talking about like needless rebellion. And that's her version of the story as she talks about it way later, like, you know, towards the end of her own life. And her and Alan only got like 20 years together, not even, I don't think, as far as like once they got married. And to listen to her tell that story, she's like, I held him off for 2 years, and those were 2 years that we could have been together. And in the end, like you can definitely, it just gives me chills. Like you can feel that she's like, that's like one of the regrets, you know? And like I've talked about this in other videos on my channel here recently, as far as karma, it's not always making some big, gross, hairy mistake, like you did something illegal, you killed somebody. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be like the love of your life was there and in your face and ready for you, and you said, I'm gonna stick with my independence because that's what I got going on. That's what I'm doing. And you held to your independence for years, and then finally realized that like, I mean, the whole point of my independence was so I didn't settle, was so I could stay in a place where I was open and holding firm to my own individuality and what I want. And then what I wanted showed up, and I was so busy holding on to my individuality that I didn't even recognize that what I was actually doing all of this for was standing right in front of me. And so 2 years of their relationship that they could have been together, and she maintained her residence on the opposite side of the country. So that's a good example of like what that Aquarius Descendant shadow can turn into. Happenstance, and we're not going to get into this because we're out of time, but she also has Uranus in the 7th house, and Aquarius has 2 ruler planets, Saturn and Uranus. And so to have the Aquarius Descendant and Uranus in the 7th house, basically both of those, the very short version is she's going to have really non-traditional relationships. She's going to have a very individualized definition of what those relationships should be, and they will be extremely founded in the individual freedom of both parties. So that is just kind of in a nutshell, really. I feel like there's still so much more that we could dig into with this Leo rising Aquarius Descendant, but that kind of sets you up for a good big chunk of understanding as far as those 2 placements go. So I hope you've enjoyed this 3rd episode of Unique Astrology on Miss Betty White, the legendary soul that this time and place was blessed to get to watch her do her thing for almost 100 years. And I positively love making these episodes where we get to tune into her energy. The love that she had was palpable while she was alive, and as far as I'm concerned, still is. So thank you so much for taking this in. I hope you take such good care of yourself until next time, and so will I.